Uh-oh. You're gonna need to save after I'm just tuning in.
Esto es Comando Z.
Hi everybody, Leisha Cupelo here from Come and See Podcast. With us today, Ginger Chien. Ginger Chien is a device architect at AT&T. She's responsible for defining technical requirements for mobile devices in the areas of security, protocols, and new features, and she guides the integration of these evolving technologies into new devices. She spends a lot of time these days musing about the social implications of technology. The pace of technology changing having passed the inflection point of generational comprehension and the reintegration of traditional collaborative communications and social purpose into prevailing culture of competition and scarcity. As an individual, as part of panels, and as AT&T representative, she frequently speaks to corporations, senior citizen groups, schools, and church on diversity and inclusion best practices and her transgender experience. Without further ado, let's welcome Ginger. I have a couple of questions, and I would love to start talking about designing new technologies. So I want to know, when you are designing new technologies, and what step do you take to ensure that ethical considerations such as privacy, security, and fairness are adequately addressed?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. You know, the question of ethical considerations, interestingly, has been covered in pretty much every professional engineering society or group for generations. They've all had ethical codes of conduct and ethical codes of practice. But in many ways, those have been overlooked as just advice. And I really do appreciate what has happened in recent years in engineering, and especially as highly scalable, high impact technologies have entered the world, those in which even seemingly tiny decisions made by a creator or an engineer or a software developer amplifies millions of times over millions of copies or over globally distributed systems. I don't know if the question of ethics has really penetrated the daily thinking of all engineers yet, but I'm glad to see the emphasis, and I really like the fact that we're opening with this question. I see ethics as being pretty much inseparable from questions of equity, and you'll probably hear me blurring the line between those concepts as we go through today's conversation. I was very impressed by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that were released a number of years ago. The rationale and the thought process and the considerations of the 17 or so criteria of sustainability, all of them touch on human ethics and equity. For example, access to water, access to education, access to civil rights. And a lot of those directly translate into technologies. For example, access to water is understandably very technology-based, but access to certain dimensions of social equity, such as education, are going to be connected with technology as well, because that is the emerging delivery method for these services. And so I see technology woven into all of these. And as a result, the positive and negative impacts of technology are unavoidable on society in both the areas of equity and in the areas of social impact. So, you know, I have some favorite examples, ones which opened my eyes to the impact of technology. And I suppose even as a little kid, I had an awareness of this because I was playing with flashlights and batteries and simple circuits, even as a really young child.
Nice.
And I realized that, something as simple as a flashlight, that is an encapsulation, an embodiment of many aspects of engineering in terms of usability, in terms of physical accessibility, in terms of performance. For example, if you had a flashlight that is simply too heavy to carry, it becomes inaccessible to certain categories of users. If you have a flashlight that doesn't last long enough or is not bright enough, then it becomes useless to someone who is performing emergency medical procedures at night. So it was already something I knew because I was playing with the batteries, I was switching out the light bulbs, and I knew that my experience with something as simple as a flashlight was very different depending on the engineering decisions I was making. And I see the engineering conveniences spilling into engineering designs. And again, one of my favorite examples is the example of film technology. Traditional light-based cameras capturing images on film and going through the chemical development process to eventually produce a photograph. There were articles written long ago about whether or not film technology had its roots in racist practices, which is kind of a shocking proposal. But when you think about it, who was it that was capable of having the chemistry knowledge? Typically very educated upper-class scientists in the West. And then who was involved in creating all of the chemistry, both in the film and in the development chemicals, in the papers, to produce images that looked attractive? Again, highly educated individuals. And then who was, or what was going to be the subject of the images in film? And it turns out that decades ago, Kodak chose Caucasian female models as their reference images. And for many, many years, the film technologies, all of the chemistry, the capture, the development, all of that was tailored to reproducing what Kodak decided was an ideal printed reference images for a Caucasian woman wearing brightly colored clothing. And unfortunately, those same standards were basically ported into digital camera technology as well. And then it ended up being captured in the algorithms. And not only did it affect the rendering of people, in particular, the rendering of people of color, with Black people being particularly poorly captured and rendered in images, looking very artificial. It also affected entire industries like furniture that was made of dark wood, or people who were taking technical photographs of objects that were just not in the color range of humans or clothing or landscapes and skies. All of those affected technology in the image capturing domain for a long time. And only recently have there been, for example, algorithms built into software to do the same kinds of natural color corrections that our eyes and brains do, so that we can see people in the ways that are meaningful and representative, and not as captured in the distorted chemistries of film or distorted algorithms of early digital cameras.
Thank you for that amazing example. Like, sometimes we need to actually learn about history to understand like what we are doing, not necessarily wrong, but maybe it's wrong. In order to make something different and actually make an impact and a change of the way that we are doing things.
And I'd like to close that with a thought question that I think all of us should keep in mind, which is, as we develop a technology, who is missing at the table? Who is contributing ideas to the design or the other performance goals? And then to go further, there's an example of, okay, when we launch this product, let's think about who we are leaving out. And I derived that from a thought question that I heard from an engineering peer who said that when she and her team do engineering hires, they go through the process, they try to be as inclusive as possible, they try to look at backgrounds and skills to make sure that they're doing more than simply looking at book learning. But after they eventually hire someone, she sits the whole team down once again, and they say, let's go over the list of the candidates who we didn't choose. And with this person, what are we missing out on that our selected candidate does not give us? And with the next person and the next person and the next person, to keep in mind and keep in motion that thought process of what are we missing with every decision that we make? Because as in economics, every decision that we make is a choice between at least one other option. And economists understand that there is an opportunity cost to choosing even what seems like the best choice, because you are losing what the first and the second and the third alternative inherently have unique to them.
The what if question.
Exactly.
So that leads me actually to my second question, and then it's more related to social inequalities. How do you approach designing technology in a way that promotes inclusivity and accessibility for all users, regardless socioeconomic backgrounds and abilities?
Yeah, I think there's a misnomer there that there is a solution for all users. Mm-hmm. And so I like to get out of that box initially in my thinking and immediately broaden my thought process to consider, as painful as it might be, as inconvenient as it might be, or as expensive as it might be, to consider the design requirements for different classes of users. I think that's just really important. You can eventually decide to launch one product, but it is at least with the awareness
exactly
that you are making compromises, and that ethically and morally, you have to live with that awareness. And that can lead you to eventually introduce variants of products or alter the design. But I think the most dangerous situation is when you limit yourself to a single solution and be good with that, simply because it meets schedule and budget. And the 80-20 rule of marketing, or whatever basic constraints you may be working within in your organization. So I like to insist that people think about possibilities. And again, to the question of what if, what if we are leaving people out? What if we aren't considering other options?
Yep. I'm fully agree with that. What with your answer actually happens to me in so many aspects when I actually do consulting. And I know what is good for companies, and I know sometimes that maybe the decisions they are taking is not necessarily what is good. But they need to do things more to move goals, and that's good. But at least they have the knowledge of what they are living and what they can actually do in the second and the third design sprint, for example. And it's really important that we inform correctly C-levels, and we inform correctly engineers when we are, for example, this in my perspective that I'm a designer, that at least we have the knowledge of the things that we are doing correctly. And if we have another take that we need to take, at least we are informed.
Yes, I fully agree. And I use that same philosophy in other aspects of DEI coaching. I gave a talk recently in which my goal was to challenge people to think about paradoxes, to think about decisions as a spectrum. And it's one of those things where I want them to see it once, because once they see it, they can't unsee that.
Unsee it, yes.
Right? And you may have heard of the allyship spectrum. You can be merely aware and then walk away from doing anything, pretty low bar. You can be an ally and post some memes. You can be an advocate, take some risks. You can be an accomplice and move for systemic change against the status quo and take the slings and arrows from the status quo over that, but I want to put that in front of people and keep their minds greased to the fact that there are always possibilities. And are you ethically comfortable with where you are sitting on that scale, knowing that you could do better?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Given their, sometimes they can unseen later. So yeah, I would love to talk about a little bit, moving forward a little bit to another topic that actually you are an expert on this specifically, and for me it's super super important. We know that the pace of technology advance can sometimes make challenge for elder generations to keep up, and it's super hard. So how do you ensure that technology products remain accessible and user-friendly for users with varying levels of technology literacy?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to some of the things I said already, and a key part is awareness. We know that demographics change, and so whatever you may have been designing as far as the demographics of a product, those demographics are constantly shifting. It can leave previously good designs behind, and it can also result in missed opportunities. For example, elderly people are one of the largest populations these days. They face growing challenges in terms of sheer numbers of individuals with, for example, Alzheimer's and memory conditions, or fine motor skill, vision. All of these basically have made electronics and smartphones that my elderly mother would love to use. It makes them unusable, completely unusable. She can't see the fine print on a phone. She can't even read the buttons on a digital device.
Or touch it because it's super small.
It's small. Her hand jitters. And so she has dry skin. I mean, there are all sorts of things that result in technology being unusable. I was at her house a while back, and she had somehow modified some of the standing menus on her smart TV. And I can totally see how that can happen, because navigation is enmeshed with modification commands on screen. I mean, just in any icon, you have the ability to activate it, you have the ability to move it, and those are very different functions. And she was accidentally moving things and activating, deactivating menus. Every now and then I would go there, and it would be giving voice feedback for every navigation command she gave in some Eastern European language. It was driving her crazy. But what is a problem for her, I do see as an opportunity, and I would love to see, for example, a smart television or any smart appliance which can be remotely managed by family members or other authorized skilled users to immediately change the user interface in a way that it plainly presents exactly what the user needs in a manner that works for them, whether it's big print, whether it is something in icons in certain colors. I mean, all of these techniques are used in other aspects of user interface design, but to be able to bring it to and customize it for the unique challenges faced by, for example, different kinds of elderly users would be a huge gift to me in order to keep my mom connected with her technology.
Yep.
Now, it turns out email is extremely hard to make usable. Even the notion of a sender and a recipient simply presented as typed fields can be incomprehensible to someone who doesn't have a good grasp of even basic computer technology. And the use of icons is helpful, but it would take huge redesign of email apps to make them usable. I see hope for televisions and cell phones, but not for email apps yet. I encourage anyone to approach that from the standpoint of elderly users. But yeah, the usability of something like a rice cooker, where there's a power on switch and it turns itself off after it's done. That is what level of usability is needed. It needs to be ported to electronics, but clearly the rice cooker user does not have the ability to modify the mechanics, and so it remains always functional.
It is super surprising how people, even at this state in terms of design, don't get mental models and how important are for understanding usability, right? Like a menu, like 3 lines. Well, it's not so simple for everybody, even people that, I mean, maybe doesn't never know that that is actually a menu.
Yeah.
And that actually leads me to an example. I don't want to do any of advertising, but Uber makes a great example in terms of like now you can arrange to pick up a person. And for example, in my case, trying to use it with my mother-in-law has been like a huge difference. And it's super important how we can actually copy and paste the good things. Like we have examples out there. We have companies that are doing it good. Why we are reinventing the wheel and doing more complex if we will have really good examples around, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm really curious about your talk on What If Summit. Can you give us a sneak peek of what you'll be discussing on this conference?
Yeah. A lot of my talks are meant to straddle technology and inspiration. So I will often do storytelling. I will often talk about technology details. I will talk about self-awareness and authenticity within a technical workspace. As our workspaces try to become more inclusive, and as we try to create workplaces that can create inclusive products, I think all of those need to come together, even the emotional intelligence piece, because ultimately we are still humans packed into a space trying to work together, and emotional intelligence is going to be one of the kinds of threads that holds the fabric of an organization together. And like a brain, if you lose a few connections between a few critical brain cells, things start to malfunction. And I see that happening in organizations as well. So I do technology, emotional awareness, and inspiration. My goal is to bring all of those into my talk for the What If Summit. I will be doing it in the context of patents. And I have a lot of experience with patents. I checked the other day, I think I have 70 odd patents at this time. It's something that I stumbled into, not because I have a PhD, and I don't, and not because I work in R&D labs or wear white lab coats. I don't. I am a system engineer with electrical engineering background, and the awareness of different frames of thought, different social experiences that come from being a transgender and Asian woman. And it turns out in the world of creativity, sure, we can continue to advance what today's technology suggests. But the real breakthroughs are just that. They're breakthroughs. They come from completely exiting the box. And what better way to exit the box than to bring experiences that are completely outside the norm? All of a sudden, you're in a completely different place that most other people don't even know how to approach or think or conceptualize problems. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in this presentation that I'll be doing to inspire people that there is value to your uniqueness. And if you personally and your organization together can provide that key enablement of it feeling safe and feeling welcome to bring that authenticity to the table, that is a formula for those breakthrough ideas that most of the rest of the team has not even bothered to think about. And there's a similar thing that's happening in the world of patents. Patents are all about fresh ideas. And if we can, again, break out of the norm, that's where people can gain recognition, and it has reputational advantages. It can have financial advantages to startups. Those are opportunities that I want people of unique backgrounds to be able to claim. And so that's going to be the goal of my presentation.
You will give us the tools and the weapons. We are super excited and looking forward to hear your talk. And we cannot go if I cannot do this question. And I know that I actually almost accidentally mentioned before, but what if organizations put DI first?
That is a shift of reference that I think is really valuable in today's engineering world, just because of the sheer complexity, typically. And as we commoditize enabling technologies that helps lower the bar, for example, to web publishing or to video and podcast production, right? That would have required massive studios in the past. But putting DEI first would mean making sure that technology and the large organizations and their interests are not the barrier to putting DEI first. In my opinion, it is true when you're looking at large organizations that are in fiercely competitive spaces and have to meet schedule. DEI can come second, or at least below first. And the notion of putting DEI first is kind of a radical proposal, but much like breaking out of the box, I think it is the creator of possibilities. And even if it may not be formally embraced in, say, the literal engineering device or design practice or the literal accounting practices, it can be elevated in the culture. It can be put first there. And so I want to remind people that there is the opportunity, whether it is in ethical design and equitable practices, or if it's in company culture, or, as I will get into in the future, even in the world of patents, it is possible to have DEI related or DEI directly relevant principles enter your constant train of thought in the work that you do, or in the way that you interact with your peer brain cells in your organization, so that you can be as functional and creative as possible.
So, everybody, you are listening to Ginger. Please follow Ginger advice. Ginger, if we want to actually follow you and have questions for you, when we can follow you?
The best way to do it is to look me up on LinkedIn. I love hearing from people there, and we can communicate or engage in joint idea development, or just make an appointment for a coffee meeting. It's all good with me, and I hope to hear from some of you on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much, Ginger, for this amazing interview. I learned so much of you today. Now I have my notes and I have work to do.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. I love talking about this stuff.
It's so great. Well, thank you, everybody. Será hasta la próxima.